Hey, while I get these mothers mic'd up, ooh, you like how that sounds?
Yes.
Get these mothers mic'd.
These are the deep seats.
I want to welcome you to what I think going to be one of the most compelling services. We had a great conversation at the 8 a.m. Express service. Shout out to the Expressers. If you are a morning person and you just find yourself twiddling your thumbs waiting for the 9:15 service, I'll tell you what, there's magic happening at 8 o'clock. Am I right? Am I right? I feel like we're leading, I feel like this is like The View. That's what I feel like Oprah right now. I feel like Barbara. I don't know who leads that, but I feel like that right now.
You could be Whoopi.
So the format for today is a grand panel, and we're calling it Lessons from Mom. And each of these women are members here at Torrey Pines Church. They do significant things for the church, but they also are significant in each of their own ways in their families, in respect to the children that they are raising or have raised. And I think, honestly, just you have been a voice this morning of God's love and God's grace over all of us. You don't have to be a mom to know that God is for you and loves you and has a plan and a purpose for you. And the conversation this morning, I felt like really conveys that. So thank you, ladies, for taking your own Mother's Day and getting up extra early and preparing extra long for this conversation. I hope that it blesses you as much as it's gonna bless everybody out here. And we're gonna start with Proverbs 31, a small snippet out of Proverbs 31. And I had alluded earlier that this is much more of a compass than it is a map. And I think the book of Proverbs it's a wisdom book. It says, apply these things and it will enhance your life. And I love what we get out of Proverbs 31 because it is the image, it's the depiction of a woman who is longing after God's heart, a person who is choosing to chase God despite circumstances in her life. And it says that she's clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. When she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instruction with kindness. And I believe that this morning we are gonna have that conversation clothed in wisdom. And I don't doubt that each of you have something really great. I'm gonna introduce each of these ladies. So Ruby, on my closest corner here, you know her, she serves at our church. You probably have met her on the steps on the way in. That was the first time I actually met Ruby while she was saying hello and welcome to everybody. Then we've got Cindy, longtime member at our church and just back from some very extravagant travels in Europe. I just heard about those. Stevie Moultrie, known for over a decade and is venturing and adventuring through motherhood currently. And then finally, Dr. Amanda Pavich, who not only is a mother and member here, but also on staff at East Lake Church Network at large as the director of the college. So if that announcement spiked your interest, you can have a conversation directly with her. But as we dive in, we asked each of the moms to come up with a phrase or a thing that stood out to them that they've either communicated to their own families or that they have felt like God had been communicating to them either through their family, their community, or just their journey. And for Ruby, as we get started, Ruby, you have 2 kids. They're both in high school, so you are fighting the good fight as we speak. And Ruby also came this morning and gave me a bunch of powdered substances to put into my water, which was like, all of my senses are heightened right now. I don't know what you gave me, but I'm feeling tremendous. Those are super mom powers. But Ruby's story is unique because she's been walking this journey as a single mom. And so there is a sense of uniqueness in what God has allowed you to both experience, but also pass on. And I'd love it if you could just break open your story for us a little bit because your point has a lot to do with where we put our focus. Could you share a little bit with us?
Yes. I want to share that my mom had me at the age of 17, and she was already a child herself. And she never missed an opportunity to tell me how grateful she was that she had me, even though she was so young. and how much she loved me, and she just wished that I would have health and happiness and love in my life. When I became a mom, it took that to a whole new level. I understood at a different dimension than I did probably as a child what gratitude feels like as a mom, and it overwhelmed me to an extent that I started to feel and try to find gratitude in some of the different seasons of life. As I've gotten older, we've had, different seasons, and it kind of stuck with me and shaped my attitude about gratitude.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. We share a similarity in that story. My mom was 17 when she had me, and I know that my parents, later in life, they were very honest and said, we questioned whether or not we even wanted to begin a family now. And that would have meant me not being here. And when your mom, so young as a child, has a child, if she puts gratitude as the focal point, there's something supernatural happening there. And I think of what you had said about it has led you through several seasons and challenging moments in your own life. You were talking to me about a discovery that the doctors told you about your daughter that challenged your gratitude. Talk to us through that.
So if any of you have 2-year-olds, around the time my daughter was 2.5, when she was potty training. That's always fun already to start with. We found out that she had a condition, and no parent ever wants to have a doctor hear those words, your daughter has a lifelong condition. And I felt like it was not real, like I was a puddle. It felt like it was a mistake. He wasn't talking to me. And I felt very challenged in my faith and in everything. And by the time she was 3, she had to have surgery. We had to have several procedures up until then that were horrifying. She has bilateral reflux. And so I made a decision, and it was an inflection point in our life that changed the course of our family's direction forever, that I wanted us to come back to church and to find a church, to find a way to have Christ as our foundation, to have faith that everything was going to be okay, even though I was pretty angry and I didn't want to believe that at the time. But it did teach me this powerful lesson, that a cliche that kind of bothers me sometimes, but I also sometimes think it's okay. I go back and forth, is everything happens for a reason. But we've had some pretty challenging seasons in our family, and I've seen some happen in the world that I really don't believe now that everything happens for a reason. But I did hear recently in a book I was reading that resonated with me, that if you can find the meaning,
the purpose,
in everything that happens, it's okay to move through those feelings of pain to hope and faith again.
Yeah, it's good. Which leads us to your fill-in, because you're speaking about when you find yourself in the lowest of lows, when you find yourself in the valleys, what encourages me is that was a catalyzer, it was a catalyst that brought your family back to faith. And you decided now's the time to lean in and to find the good in what seemed like a train wreck. It seemed like there was no good to be found. And you've come up with a practice with your family that I think is worth sharing about when you don't want to or you don't see any good, that you discipline yourself to find it in a particular way. Would you share with the community as they go through their first fill-in? Tell them what the fill-in is.
Gratitude changes everything.
Gratitude changes everything. And what have you subjected your family to that has helped them understand that principle?
Sometimes I don't want to find gratitude, and so I can relate to that. They're teenagers. I know there's teenagers out here. It's tough sometimes. So they'll be feeling particularly ornery or sour, and I will stop.
Those are gracious words, by the way. Those are very gracious words. You're so ornery. Go to your room.
I will stop them, and I will make them give me 3 things they are grateful for on the spot. And they get so irritated. But I do it because I believe that your brain believes what you tell it, and it's a decision to change to gratitude, not something that comes naturally certain times.
Yeah, I think that honors Jesus too. When you declare the good things that are there, even if they're hard to find, you're stacking more weights on the opposite end of the scale, if you can see that visual. You put a verse inside for us to kind of resonate or attach to that. Talk us through 1 Thessalonians in the way that you connect it to this whole concept in your own world about gratitude changing everything.
Well, again, I believe rejoice always is a practice that I keep, and having teenagers, and I love them with all my heart, but I do pray without ceasing just about every day. And I do give thanks every day. It's easy sometimes to give thanks, but in the particularly hard times, I'll have to dig a little bit deeper and maybe have ice cream on a Monday morning.
Yes.
Or just try to transport me to hearing the sound of their laughter. So I do believe that God will find joy in everything.
That's awesome. I love Thessalonians reminds us that it is the will of God himself that we would rejoice in every season, right? It sets us apart from every other human around us. If in the worst of the worst, we can find the best of the best. And it's compelling at best to go, what is going on with you when all of this cloud cover and you still shine brighter than anybody else who would be in that same space? Thanks, Ruby. As we make our way down, I want to introduce you to Cindy. And Cindy is the future version of Ruby because Cindy's kids are grown. They are out of the house. They are off to college. Some graduated, some in it. But she has made her way through the gauntlet and now is on the glorious other side of that storyline. Cindy, tell us what God is teaching you in this particular season of your life and what God had done in your past that led us to this place.
Yeah. I had this thought flash. And I have two that are getting married this year. So that's what you have to look forward to. But, okay, so when I was asked to do this, I couldn't come up with a phrase right away. And so as I was just sitting with God, he led me to a time when I was a young mom. I had 3 of my 4 kids at the time. And it was just this really profound experience that changed my life forever. And that was that my father had a stroke that went to the part of his brain that stopped his lungs, and he had lack of oxygen for 5 minutes to his brain. When he woke up from his coma, he could not breathe on his own. He had lost his swallow reflex, so he was being fed through a feeding tube, and he couldn't walk. And it was going to take up to 2 years for the brain to recover, and we had no idea what was going to come of the results. And every day I would visit him, and I would sit at his bedside, and I would love him and try to encourage him. And I began to talk to him about God. He was a respecter of God, but he was not a Christ follower. And I was trying to talk to him about his intrinsic value as a human being. The rug had been completely pulled out from under him. He was a very successful businessman. And now he could not even take care of himself. And he was really struggling with the whole concept of being loved unconditionally because he had performed so much and he was very successful. And I left one day, my father, and I started to realize, I struggle with these same things. I still think that God loves me more when I behave a certain way or when I do certain things. And even though I had been learning more about grace and forgiveness and unconditional love, I was still struggling with it. And then I go home and I look at my 3 kids and I think to myself, I don't want to pass this on. And so I had this really profound moment of I'm spending all this time with my children because they're so young. I'm focusing on teaching them to be responsible citizens of the world and don't embarrass me in public. Will you please behave well?
Yes.
And
That's the one we're on right now. We're on
right?
that one right now. Yeah.
Have good table manners and achieve well in school. And I was thinking, am I equally helping them to understand how beautifully and unique they are, how they've been so beautifully and uniquely created by God, and how much He loves them and cares for them? So I made this distinct decision to no longer ask them, how are they doing? But I have always asked them since that point, how are you being? And it really helped me to consciously look at them as a human being. And it's really opened up the door through the years to talk more about how they're doing internally and their feelings and thoughts versus, how are they doing in all of their aspects of life.
Yeah, don't miss just the wrecking ball on that statement, okay? You are a human being, not just a human doing. And how you rephrase that idea for your kids to understand that who they are is beyond what they do.
Right.
And for a mom to tee that up early in a child's life, or for your kids who are in the apex of accomplishment, right, where what they accomplish is going to determine what their outcomes will be, you flip the whole playbook upside down. And that has created, I think it's interesting that God would allow you the clarity of that moment, right? He wouldn't have you come into that understanding early, but right as you had kids, He allowed you to be a vessel of that truth from seeing your Father, absorbing it yourself, and then immediately investing that paradigm into your children. I think a lot of times if you sit inside of like the Christian circles, you ask God, I want to be used by you, God. I want to be a vessel for you, for your truth and your love. And that is a perfect moment of that happening in your particular case. Later, you see the dividends of that spoken truth over your children, particularly in your son. Would you share part of that?
They wanted me to share this because oftentimes, we think, are our kids really taking in what we're saying? Are they going to apply this as they grow? And so as I was doing this, putting together these thoughts, I literally stumbled on this. And this is something that one of my sons wrote to me. He just turned 31 yesterday. He was 24 at the time, and he had really gone through a very difficult time. But this is part of what he wrote to me. He said, I want to thank you for reminding me where my true identity lies. While the world continues to try to define me by my accomplishments, you have shown me that I am worth being loved because I am your son. That love only comes from knowing a God who loves us for just being us, not because of anything we do. You love me like Christ loves me. I think that says it all right there.
I was just thinking of like my own kids. I would just pray my child says something that generous.
Oh my gosh.
I love it because, Cindy, you wouldn't call yourself like, you took all the perfect steps, modeled the perfect mother, and God's grace poured out over your children. It is evidence that, whether or not you can see what you're investing in later in those years, God really does the work to reveal Himself in the lives of the kids that He's entrusted us with. And whether those are your biological kids, your adopted kids, or the kids God has put around you, every one of us has an opportunity to be that kind of prayerful investor, that conscious investor of character and morale and spirituality. Cindy, thanks for sharing. Thanks for bringing a part of your family to the table there. Stevie, you are, let's rewind the books because you are
I'm not an empty nester.
Yeah,
I'm not.
You are the empty nest, Stevie. Stevie's 12 years old, guys, and she's a mom here. So we're going to just pray for her. We're going to pray over her. I've known Stevie for like 10 plus years. And when we first met, Stevie was a bubbly college student, and she was a pseudo mom and a pseudo big sister for so many girls that come in and out of youth ministry who maybe don't have enough courage or confidence to speak to their own mothers about the things they're going through. But then recently, 2 years ago, you became a mom to cute little Cruz, and now you are expecting your second. That's public knowledge, right? Okay, good. Just
Nick, congratulations.
Mom streaming online.
Just kidding. Yes, it's public.
But Stevie, you and Nick as a team are leading our own Torrey Pines youth ministry, junior high, senior high girls, and now you're acting as that pseudo mom for even some of our own kids. What has God taught you in that season of being kind of the spiritual mother for so many girls in the season that God has afforded you, and now in this own timeline of your own?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of things I've been taught for sure, but a big thing is life is humbling. And I know that sounds super simple, but it's so true. It doesn't matter what season you're in or what role you're currently playing or have played or will be playing. Life is humbling, so humbling. And I've learned that there's a big difference between being humbled and being humiliated.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's my fill in the blank.
Nice, nailed it. You nailed it.
There's a big difference between being humbled and being humiliated. And the difference in that is that in which you view it. Being humiliated is purely me focused. It's me based, it's me focused.
Like comparison.
Comparison.
And,
it's being humiliated is fear-based, right? These things are the root of me, right? So being humbled is Jesus-focused. When you step into motherhood, and really in any role that we play in life, but I remember specifically stepping into motherhood over Cruz. I remember being pregnant with Cruz, my first son, and being in my counselor's office, and I remember just crying. I remember crying thinking, this isn't where I thought I would be when I'm expecting my first child home. I didn't expect me to still be in a 500 square foot home. I didn't expect for our finances to not be more steady. I didn't expect for us to still be in unstable jobs, in between jobs. I thought we'd be well into our career, I thought I'd be well into my own healing process as a person. And now I'm supposed to bring this child into my home, and we don't even have a car of our own anymore. Like, our car broke and we were carless for a while. We had to borrow a car from our friend. And I was telling you, I remember leaving the hospital with my son, outside the hospital, taking a picture as we're going home. And it wasn't like, oh, we're going home, let's get a picture, because this is like classic thing with our car. We're putting him in the car for the first time. It was, here, let's take a picture in front of this car so I could remember this moment that I have to borrow someone's car to bring my son home. And we're not even sure if this car is going to make it down the freeway. You know, that's humbling. That's humbling to be like, this is my reality. And for some people, it's, I don't know that I have what it takes to be the person I need to be right now. I don't know that my family history, what if I'm going to end up like, well, my mom was amazing, my dad was amazing, but for some people's stories, it's what if I'm going to end up like my mom or my dad? Or for my family, there's definitely a lot of brokenness in my family, addiction, mental illness. What if that's something I end up bringing to the plate for my kids? What if this is very humbling? I actually don't know that I have what it takes to do this. And that's humbling, and it can be humiliating to have it be focused on you, or it can be faith-based and have it be focused on Jesus. And that sounds super like, yay, cherry on top, everything's easy, but it's actually really hard. And it brings me to the verse in Matthew 7, 24 through 27. And Jesus is talking about the wise build a house on the rock. And though the winds come, and though the floods come, and the storm slams against the house will not fall. But the foolish build their house on the sand. I don't know if you guys have ever been to like the ocean, but I sometimes in like my secret place pray to be a mermaid because I just love the ocean. So for some reason, Jesus hasn't granted me that. I'm not sure why, but I just love the ocean. So I don't know if you guys have ever been in the ocean. The waves are like slapping up against your legs and going up, and then it sucks back out and the sand sucks out from underneath you, and you're like, whoa, and you lose your balance. And you're like, am I moving? Is the sand moving? And it's sucking out from underneath you. It says the foolish build their house on the sand, and the winds come and the storm comes and it slams against the walls, and it comes with a crash, and a great fall it was, right? What the scripture doesn't say is the wise built their house on the rock and then they dodged the storm, and Jesus granted, like you were saying, they did really well, so Jesus blessed them and nothing bad ever happened to them again. It doesn't say that. It says the storm came. And it says the same words for both houses. It came, it flooded, it slammed against the house. It came with a force. The difference was the one built on the sand crumbled. The difference was the person who's so me-focused, which is easy to do, especially in this day and age. So me-focused is boarding up the windows, getting hurricane ready, right? Putting sandbags at the doors to keep it from there, trying to hold this up, where the person on the rock, the person who's focused on Jesus, is saying, I can't do it. I don't have the ability to board up the house. I don't have the ability to keep this up. So all I can do is crunch down in your shelter and have faith that even if I don't believe, even if I don't feel it, because it isn't easy. Like you were saying, Ruby, you had to force yourself, and you still do, to find gratitude even when you don't want to. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be happy. I don't want to be thankful right now. But you force yourself, right? So being humbled is, I'm in a process. I'm in a process of being renewed by the Lord. And I know that I'm fearful right now. I know that this storm is coming, but I'm going to hunker down in the house instead of trying to board it up, because I'm going to hunker down. I know it's on the Lord. And I'm going to have faith that even though I don't see it, even though I don't believe it, even though I don't feel it in the moment, I'm going to have faith that you're going to come through. Yeah, and you're going to hold the house up for me. You're going to bring my kid through. You're going to bring me through. It's you versus it. Sorry, you can ask me. Sorry, I got on a roll.
No, I like you put it really plainly. If I was going to tell somebody to take notes, take note on this next phrase from Stevie, because she articulates the perspective between humiliation versus being in a process of becoming being humbled. Yeah. And you said it's one versus something and another versus something else.
Yeah, being humiliated is you versus it. Whatever it is for your story, your current situation in life. For me, it's being a mom, and it's trying to figure out, how do I have a 2-year-old? And then how do I bring a newborn in while having a toddler? Like, that is just my it right now, right? But your it can be anything, whatever stage of life you're in, whatever current situation it is. Being humiliated is you versus it. Being humbled is Jesus versus it. Being humbled, I think in the Christian world, it's really cute and pretty and fun to say, like, me and Jesus, we hooked arms and we skipped along and did it together. Because it sounds good, right? It sounds good, me and Jesus did it together. When in reality, it has to be Jesus versus it. When we say we did it, it gives us the pressure that we actually have something to do with it. Yeah. And we don't. Yeah. Jesus took the cross because we literally could not do it ourselves. And so it has to be us hunkered down, praying that the house won't fall down, and just believing that Jesus is taking it for us.
I love that. Yeah, thanks for that. It's easy and it's clear to understand that the foundation is never strapped to the house. It's the opposite. It's the opposite way. So good. Onward, doctor, as we close this conversation. Dr.
I can
Amanda
just say
Pavich.
nothing. I mean, we can go home right now. Like, this is amazing. You guys are
Amanda
amazing.
brings a really amazing perspective. She's got 3 lovely boys, all adopted into your home. And that's created a unique environment by which you and your husband, Miles, have been shepherding this family. And it's created perspective for you that goes way beyond the home. And I think this is a perfect way of ending today's conversation. Why don't you share your woes in a certain sense
My
that
woes.
would that point us in a way that we could
Do
close.
we have all day for the woes? No, so I'm Amanda, and I am an adoptive mom, like you are an adoptive dad, so we have that in common. And the interesting thing about being an adoptive parent is that for example, all of my children did not come to us as infants. And so as our particular adopted family, we don't have the benefit of biology. And so we have to be very intentional about creating a family culture from a lot of different origin stories and trying to bring all of those stories together and to create a cohesive unit and a cohesive family and a really fun place to hang out. And so we have a lot of one-liners. We were talking about this and my kids were like, oh, we can make a list of all the things that Uma says. And they call me Uma, which is mommy in Korean. So that's my name. So anyway, the particular one-liner that I wanted to talk about today came about because of a little yellow Lego head. And for all the boy moms out there, you feel me, right? The
I just want to
tiny
clarify,
little
you said
Legos.
Lego head.
Lego head.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, the little tiny yellow Lego heads that are all around the house that hurt your feet. And you're like, do we really need to have this product in our house? Right, okay. So you're feeling me. So my kids are really, really good at the things that they're assigned to, their chores, their homework, their sort of family responsibilities. They do a really, really good job of performing those types of things when we ask them to do. They don't give us a ton of flack. But it's kind of this stuff in between that isn't really anybody's responsibility that they're not so good at. And I think this is where moms just really feel like all those responsibilities in between. And particularly, I was super irritated about this one little Lego head that was sitting in the hallway. And it was just staring at me with this like really weird looking face. And it was a very important face that they had to have because it went with this specific body and whatever. And I'm like, it's not that important because it's still sitting in the hallway. And anyway, so I thought, I am not gonna pick this up. Like I do a lot of picking up and I'm not gonna pick this one up. So I decided to wait to see how long it would take my gentleman to pick up this Lego head.
You conducted an experiment.
Yes.
A spiteful experiment.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, that Lego head laughed at me from the hallway, okay? And then I realized, all right, family meeting, we need a new one-liner. It's called See It, Own It, okay? So that's our fill-in, see it, own it. And what this is it's just that idea that we all have jobs to do, but if you see a Lego head in the hallway, look, you saw it, you own it, you pick it up, right? You see that toilet paper roll in there, it's empty, you saw it, you own it, you pick it up. If you go past the dog and his water bowl is gross or whatever, like, you get to clean it, you get to fill it. So it's just this idea of personal responsibility that is greater than just you.
Yeah.
It's being part of a group and part of a community or part of a family. And I read a lot of literature on leadership and organizational management and those types of things. And it's really interesting because I think all of the personality tests and the temperament tests that are so popular right now, and they're really, really fun and they serve an incredible purpose. But what's happening in some of these leadership levels is it's becoming very, very specific. And I think that's a little bit of a detriment because what this stuff is saying to us is that, we need to figure out exactly who we are and we need to find the absolute perfect spot and the perfect fit and the perfect job for my perfect temperament, and that any organization that is going to be completely efficient and completely wonderful has to make sure that every single person that you hire can only do that work and there is a specific seat on this specific group bus, right? Okay, and so if you need to find your seat on this bus, and I don't know about you guys, I don't know about you, but that isn't exactly the way that it works in my family. So I feel like that by the time that we figure out what our perfect job is, that we could have kind of already been there by now. So it's just kind of like, everybody just get on the bus, pick a seat, figure it out, see it, own it. We'll sort of figure it out as we go along, right?
Yeah.
We'll figure this out.
Yeah.
So
It's a perfect word of encouragement that I would instantly apply to just the culture of our church.
Yeah.
Understanding that your family is a little microculture and you're crafting it inside. See it, own it, be responsible, the duty of all, for all.
Right.
And
because I think what we don't want to do is, I don't want my guys to have this idea that things are above their pay grade, right?
So
we
good.
have to rage against entitlement, right? We
Yeah.
really do. And I don't want them to be out there in the world and to see someone who's hurting and be like, that's not my problem. I don't want to raise kids like that. And I don't want to be that person. And so I think that just generally speaking, that there are some things that we need to do just to be part of this world that God has created. And so that's really what the see it, own it idea is. And I have a specific scripture verse from Hebrews chapter 6. And it was very encouraging to me, and I hope that it will be encouraging to you, because I do know that sometimes as we are sort of picking up the messes along the way that are not necessarily your job and not necessarily my job, but they're just kind of the things in the middle, when we are owning things, that sometimes that we feel a little put out by that. And sometimes we feel like, gosh, I'm the only one that's doing this. And I think especially that mothers can feel like that sometimes, that a lot of the work that we do is unseen and unrecognized. And this particular scripture verse in Hebrews 6, it says that God is not unjust and that he sees what you do and he takes note of that. And so I think that I just would love to encourage you, kind of on behalf of all of us sitting up here and just on behalf of Torrey Pines Church, that if you are in a space where you're doing a lot of work that maybe isn't being acknowledged, whether it's with parenting or in some other area, we just want you to know that we are so grateful and that we acknowledge that. And that we acknowledge that your idea of the world is a bigger idea, and it's the idea that you're following Jesus, and that means that you're going to do the God stuff. And you are going to love people even when someone else should have been loving them, that you're going to kind of take that step. And so I just, with my whole heart, I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for having a bigger perspective of the world. And just thank you on behalf of all of us, because you're really making the world such an easier place for us to have our kids in. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's valuable to recognize that, each of these moms' perspectives is relentlessly chasing Jesus, not just for the sake of their kids' hearts, but for their own healing, for their own deliverance, for their own peace, for their own joy, that it's not hung up on how their child turns out, or as we alluded to earlier when Fallon said, for so many moms or for so many people desiring the space or the title of motherhood, the Lord just has you in a particular place. And I want to double down on that verse, that he sees you in your space and he loves you, and he's fending for you in ways that you can't even fathom, you can't process, you can't understand today. You don't have to be a woman, you don't have to be a mother to know that. That applies to all of God's kids, wherever you find yourself, whether you're here or you're listening to this conversation 3 months from now. Would you guys do me a favor? Would you thank these moms for sharing each of their stories?